Cat in the Hat is a strange movie. It lives in this sort of perpetual infamy, and for good reason. It is a bizarre amalgamation of spite and lust and a children's book. It's not a movie that you simply watch and never think of again. Every couple of years, it's collectively remembered by the masses, and memes and recollections of the movie come around, mostly about how terrifying Mike Myers is. But beyond Mike Myers, it's still a very, very strange movie. I mean, looking at it, it seems fine and dandy, but it is one of the worst movies you could ever watch. It is bizarre, it is uncomfortable, it is incredibly horny, and it is just so full of
military
meanness.
school. I wish I could trust you.
I wish I had a different mom.
I'm not a fan of it. But it's still rather fascinating. I mean, look at it. Look at these sets. Look at these costumes. This isn't just something that people threw together. There was a lot of competency on display here. Not just competency, but love, devotion. But why? If you'll come on this journey with me, I want to go back to this movie, go back to 2003, and search through every nook and cranny in the cinematography and the acting, and every single little bit to figure out what makes this movie tick and why we just can't forget about it.
Like you saw a monster.
A monster? Where? That could have gone better.
Now, for those of you somehow not in the know, The Cat in the Hat is a book from 1957 written by Theodore Geisel under the pen name Dr. Seuss, one of the most prolific and popular children's book authors of all time, probably. It is a story of two children, much like the movie, who are alone one day on a rainy day and are quite bored. The titular Hat in the Cat shows up, and he has some fun with them. He makes messes. He is generally rambunctious. Is that how it goes? Hold on. I've not read this book since I was like 5. The cat and the children begin to have a bunch of fun and make a bunch of messes. He brings out his things, thing 1 and thing 2, and they continue to just have a great old time together. The children become more distressed though, since they are making such large messes, but the cat comes in with a big machine that cleans everything up. It makes it all nice and fancy, and it's okay. It's not my favorite Dr. Seuss book. It's not exactly innovative, but I can see why it would be so popular. It has a very good and somewhat unique moral of you can have fun as long as you can clean it up after. It's not bad by any metric, and I can understand why it would become a classic. Becoming a classic is underselling it a little bit. The Cat in the Hat is one of the most recognizable characters, probably from all of American history. The design is distinctive, and the moral is so whimsical and nice. It really screams everything that Dr. Seuss stood for, other than the racism. The second most popular character of his would definitely be the Grinch, the Christmas-hating little grump that tries to steal Christmas, and upon realizing that Christmas is more than just presents and money, understands the true meaning of it and becomes a generous, loving man like all the other Whovians. Both of these concepts are quite prime movie material if you ask me, or if you ask DreamWorks. In 2000, DreamWorks produced How the Grinch... I need my water. In 2000, ba la ba da da ni bai 3 4. In 2000, DreamWorks produced How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It was a generally good movie, if you ask me at least, with memorable and not exactly terrifying effects, and a good moral. It elaborated on the story while also making the theme come true. I really quite like it. I think it's one of the better Christmas movies out there. It certainly resonates a lot more than Here Comes Santa Claus or Rudolph, you know? It wasn't exactly a failure, and like I said, some people quite enjoyed it. And it's left quite a good legacy these days, as it is still continually played on Freeform or other TV channels. Not that anybody watches TV anymore. But 3 years later, 2003, they decided to follow up and try to make the original Dr. Seuss masterpiece into a film. And that is what we speak of today. The Cat in the Hat is a 2003 movie featuring Dakota Fanning and Alec Baldwin and Mike Myers, of course, among other people. Directed by Bo Welch. It follows the story... Some parts are quite accurate, and plot-wise, it certainly follows very similar beats. Sorry, I got distracted by one of the weird deleted scenes. The original story is rather short, understandably since it is a children's book, and this is a movie, and it has to be at least a little longer than that. This story fleshes out the two children and focuses almost entirely upon them, Conrad and Sally. Conrad and Sally are bored and do not get along very well, as their mother goes and prepares for a house party for her boss. If the house is dirty at all, she is sure to be fired. At least that is the vibe that we get.
If your house is as messy as last time,
You're fired!
Conrad is a... Sally is portrayed to be this control freak. She is overly dependent on rules. She hates to break them and she loves to make them. She has a little PDA that she uses for her calendar and all sorts of other pretty trite stuff. Conrad, on the other hand, is a devil. He's a child that constantly makes massive, really bad messes and puts himself, his sister, and their dog at constant risk. This is not like a normal child that messes around and makes messes. He just does the messes for their own sake. You understand what I mean? He is a ridiculously virulent child, showing everybody how little he cares about them, and showing his mother how much he hates her. But more on how much I hate Conrad later. Their mother is shown to be caring, but a little distant because her job demands it and she is a single mother since this was a movie from the 2000s. The last two primary characters, the first of which is Alec Baldwin, who is the antagonist, pretty much. Though antagonist is putting it a little strongly. He seems to want to marry into the main family, the Waltons, for money or food, so he doesn't have to work. We're not exactly sure. He's shown to be this suave, charming fellow, constantly on top of things, taking care of everything that the mom needs. He goes over, he occasionally will look after the kids, blah blah blah, but in truth, he's fat. He's shown later to be a lying slob in the most generic, least effort sort of sense, you know what I mean? Like, he goes home, he, like, takes off a girder to show that he is, in fact... then he, like, picks lint out of his belly button, he, like, steals their food, he eats stuff, he sneezes, gross, blah blah blah, whatever. He's not exactly a, complicated character. Last and certainly not least is the cat himself. A strange being. In the original book, the cat is this rapscallion, but he means well. He wants to have fun, and fun is his main prerogative, until he makes the twist that he does care about being clean because that is a good thing to do. In this movie, he is not that.
Time to die!
Cat, you scared him away!
Dirty hoe!
The cat in this movie is shown to be demanding, lustful, generally very irresponsible. He throws safety to the wind. I mean, he almost kills the kids multiple times, but it was all part of the plan. At least that's what the movie wants you to believe by the end of it. I don't know how much of this was due to Michael Myers acting, but the cat comes off as a very, very, very uncomfortable character. The amount of sex jokes do not help either. With this cat, people like to use the term, demon and devil, which seems very tired and overused, but remains very appropriate. He is manipulative. He is very manipulative. He constantly manipulates the children and constantly makes everybody else look insane. which is to say nothing of how insane he seems. I mean, the things that he brings out are genuine hazards to the safety of everybody in Anvil. One last character that I actually did forget, which makes sense given this movie, but the fish.
Me! Remember the fish?
In the book, the fish acts as this sort of voice of reason, the one that is scared of all the messes, who is worried for the sake of the mother. A good character in the book, it's necessary to have that foil. In this one, he has like 10 lines at most. He shows up, he looks scary, he says the cat is not good, and then occasionally makes little jokes about how he peed his water bowl or whatever, you know? Very, very ridiculously unimportant. The plot of the movie follows a similar thematic through line as the book, but falls very flat in a lot of places. But the events make sense to replace since you do need to extend the movie. Joan Walden is a real estate agent and the single mom of Sally Walden and Conrad Walden. She has an important house party tonight, and she knows that Conrad is a monster who loves to make messes. So she gets a babysitter, Kwan, I believe, Mrs. Kwan, which is the best part of the movie, to look after them and just tells them not to make a mess. Conrad gives this line,
I wish I had a different mom.
to which Joan replies with this line.
Well, sometimes I wish the same thing.
So the relationship is at least a little rocky, you know? This is going to be the last straw for Conrad, because if he makes a mess, if he ruins this for her, he's going to be sent off to military school, which, whatever Alec Baldwin's character's name is, he suggested, because he wants him out of the picture for some reason. As Conrad and Sally are bored at home, the cat shows up. Lovely! His first appearance is pretty much a jump scare, which is not very, it does not help his reputation. They have some fun and they do some strange musical numbers. They make a couple of, jokes. And then he judges how good of a kid they are. He judges, Sally as a control freak, and he judges, Conrad as a, hellion. He pulls out thing 1 and thing 2 from a crate, and they make general chaos, whatever. But, importantly, he tells Conrad, hey, this crate, don't touch this crate. And he puts a little, crab lock thing on it. Strange. Conrad, of course, in some of the chaos, gets a lockpick and, lockpicks the lock off the crate, which then, the lock attaches itself to their little dog, Nevins, who runs away. The crate begins to overflow, and this brings actual, hell stuff into the world. It begins to morph things, destroy things. We'll get back to actual literal hell later. So the movie is mostly just the cat and the 2 kids trying to get this lock back so they can lock the little crate again and make sure that the world's not destroyed by the world that the cat comes from. They eventually do get the lock back, but Joan is on the way. Oh no! They manage to beat her home, and the home seems normal until it is revealed that it's actually hell. It is actually Nightmare Realm. This is where the cat comes from, which makes perfect sense whenever you watch the movie. Larry shows up, and he falls and dies in the pits of hell. It is a terrible fate that belies Larry, and Alec Baldwin in generally most senses. They go on a little adventure through Universal Studios, and then eventually find the box. They lock it back up, and the house is destroyed. Conrad and Sally, having learned their lesson somehow, tell the cat to leave. He leaves, he comes back with a machine, he cleans it all up as per the book. Joan gets home, they kick out Larry because he's gross and smelly. And then they jump on the couch, which is fun. That's it. It seems real simple, but like a lot of things, the meat's in the small details. People would not remember this movie as they do if it weren't for the constant little jokes about how the cat wants to have sex with their mother, or the strange implications of Taiwan and the Philippines existing in the same realm as this one. The morals and themes of this movie fall almost entirely flat for a good chunk of reasons. The main moral seems to be that of balance, especially for children. Similar to the book, it seems to be saying, you need to have fun, but you also do need to be responsible. Good message. Very, very, very poorly executed. The 2 sides of this dichotomy are Sally and Conrad, and they don't work. See, Sally is portrayed and spoken of as if she were this super bossy, mean person that everybody hates because she's just so demanding with their little rules. but she's not. She generally has fun a lot like Conrad, but it just seems very organized, really. She does try to get her brother into trouble, but that's not a, like, bossy thing, that's just something siblings do. She's shown to be incredibly arrogant and thinks everybody else is beneath her. That's not as a result of her being, like, not having fun, you know what I mean? Her friends hate her, and her family hates her, and everybody hates her, but it mostly just seems like they hate a child, you know? Conrad, on the other hand, does not represent having fun but not being responsible. He represents incredible selfishness and hating everybody. The things that he does, the messes that he makes, they're not because of some, you know, loving center. They're not because he's curious or he gets too wrapped up in it. It's because he just doesn't care at all. He doesn't care about the fate of his family, he does not care about the fate of his mother, he does not care about the fate of the world until he, like, suddenly does at the end of the movie, you know? He's constantly represented in such a mean way. He's just so mean to his neighbors, to his family, to his pets, constantly. Like, not being mean is a very good moral. That's not what they're trying to say. There's not a balance that you need to do between, like, arrogance and just apathy. There's no balance there. Both are bad. You should not be either Sally or Conrad. But if you had to be one, you'd be Sally because at least she's clean about it. The cat is supposed to represent this little balance between the two concepts, but also doesn't work because he's not. In the book, it's a bit of a twist that, you know, he cleans up after everything, that he makes a mess, but he fixes it. The reason for the twist is because it's short. You learn the theme in about, like, 5 minutes if you're competent at reading, even when you're young. Here, he's just utter chaos, even beyond just, like, the emotional spite of Conrad. He makes messes because that's what he does. This is his nature, inherently destructive both to self and others. The cat here does have a function, and that function is to make big funnies, to wear a bra, and talk about trans people. I feel like he makes a transphobic joke. I don't remember. I really feel like he did. He would. Overall, the overarching story thinks that his purpose is quite different from the minute to minute. In the minute to minute, he is funny, he is comical, he is bloodthirsty, multiple times, but he doesn't represent anything other than that bloodthirsty love of chaos. This movie says nothing to children except, like, sometimes you get out of things scot-free. And, like, the fish. What about the fish? It has 10 lines, it can't say anything. Ugh. What a movie. One of the reasons why The Cat in the Hat, the original book, works so well is because the, like, moral of it is very genuine and important and a little complicated. It speaks of a balance between these two things that are very hard for a child to comprehend a balance between being possible. This movie falls into a very similar trap of a lot of kids' movies in that it doesn't say anything other than, like, one line at the end, because the kids are too stupid to understand the minute to minute, so that doesn't matter. Just make jokes about, like, you know, how you have no testicles. Now, beyond the characterizations, there's a lot of things that still went very wrong, but it's a bit bizarre. There's very obviously effort on display, quite a bit. There's even expertise. So what is wrong with it? Well, plenty. But first I do want to talk about a couple of things that I do like, because some of them are quite nice. First off, obviously, is the costume and set design. Conrad and the cat are both the exceptions for how bad they look, but man, everything else looks really good. There's these, like, awesome big props that represent what the stores are, which is, like, very Seussian. Each of the characters are so full of these gaudy colors so that the cat stands out. These are designs that I really appreciate. Even the cat's hat is very, very thorough and interesting. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes features that talk about the hat specifically and how, like, it works, which is awesome. I like a lot of it. It's just a shame that everything else sucks. There's also a couple of jokes that I think work quite well, namely a couple of the ones that do get popular every once in a while.
I'll get you, and I'll look like a bloody accident.
Sometimes, like, the dark humor works out pretty well. The cat being murderous is sometimes just absurd enough to be funny. The occasional oddball references also are just really weird in a way that I appreciate. Like Miss Kwan watching Taiwanese parliament fights.
Taiwanese parliament.
It's a channel dedicated to showing the Taiwanese parliament fights. that happen in the Taiwanese parliament. More on the Taiwanese parliament later. There's also, like, actually genuinely functional comedy in some parts. It's not the memorable ones, but some of them are pretty nice.
No answering the phone, City Morgue.
17 of your mother's rule.
City morgue!
18!
Also, I do like the things eating the ticket. I don't know, I thought it was just a funny little detail. And, you know, for the time period, the CGI really isn't that bad. It's a funny thing, because, like, back in the day when CGI was, like, new, they were always very careful and sparing with its use, because they knew that it would look out of place if they weren't careful. You know, that's how you have, you know, Jurassic Park and, what is it, Dead Man Tales, No Tales, whatever the Pirates of the Caribbean is. And then you have, like, stuff from nowadays, like, Thor Love and Thunder, that just looks terrible because the XX don't care. Last and certainly not least, some of the acting is really good. Dakota Fanning specifically is phenomenal, especially for a child actor. I mean, it's insane. And my favorite actor, though, my favorite group of actors, are the people who play Nevins. Nevins is mostly played by Bugsy, this cute little dog, but also played by a couple of their siblings, if memory serves. All of them are pretty cute. There's Bogey, there's Tuffy, and there's Short. You can't dislike dogs. It's impossible. Now on to the rest of it. There's a lot very obviously wrong with this movie, so let's just get into the meat and potatoes as we are. Michael Myers comes to mind as one of the worst things about the movie, and it makes sense if you know the history behind it. The original cat was supposed to be Tim Allen, which makes a lot of sense whenever you read through the jokes with him in mind. I don't think it'd make it that much better, but it'd be more appropriate at least. Now, Myers had a strange relationship with Universal at the time. He was supposed to be making a movie and he kept putting it off because he wanted the screenplay to be perfect, and he's a little bit of a auteur. Now, he kept putting it off, and eventually Universal sued him. He sued back, saying that they did irreparable emotional harm, blah blah blah, treated him like a thug, something, whatever. It's just a spoiled rich person trying to sue a spoiled rich person who sues the other spoiled rich person. It's exactly what you would expect. They settled all of the lawsuits out of court, and they made a contract with him that he had to be in a movie for them. And that movie was this one. He did not want to be here, but he would be held in contempt of court if he did not, which explains a lot of his acting. During the whole movie, he was reported as a terrible diva, a lot more so than he usually is, which is saying something. Now, Michael Myers does not seem exactly like an incredibly pleasant fellow. He seems very in his own head and likes to be the center of attention. He thinks himself incredibly funny at the expense of those around him. That was always true, but I think this little movie was a perfect storm of things that make him even worse. For one, he didn't want to be here. He wanted to be writing his little Sprockets movie, which I don't think ever got made. Instead had to be the Cat in the Hat. You'd be mad too. Second, the movie was filmed in Pomona, California. Now, there's a couple of traits about California, but number one trait, it's hot. It's very hot. It is blisteringly hot. Now, usually that's bad enough. He was in a ton of makeup. Now, makeup application in movies can take hours, and it certainly did in this case. He would spend hours sitting in a chair, completely motionless, while he was turned into the cat, covered in hair, real human hair, by the way, and then brought out to run around in the heat, trying to keep his best face on for children and the cameras that were filming the behind-the-scenes footage. He actually had an air conditioner that went directly into the suit, I think. I'm gonna double check that, edit this out if it's wrong, but it might not be wrong. On top of the heat and the fact that he didn't want to be there, people didn't want to work with him, at least not to the degree that he wanted them to work. The funny thing, he actually made the original makeup artist quit because of how difficult he was being. We'll get into that later. So here we have Michael Myers, already histrionic and difficult to work with, and then we put him under California heat under several layers of human hair, and then we also make him be arrested if he leaves. I don't think he was probably in the mood to be really wisecracking. Regardless of that, though, he was a self-appointed director, which leads us into our next conversation, Bo Welch.
I want to go there.
Now, Bo Welch is a interesting fella, and he's an interesting choice as director for this movie. It makes a lot more sense than it's going to initially seem. Now, Bo Welch was not a director, not by trade at least. He directed a couple of episodes of The Tick and Secret Agent Man, but television directing and movie directing are very, very different. He was a production designer, which, looking at a lot of the sets, makes sense. The vibe of Anvil is very Susie, and it's one of the best things about the movie. Things feel legitimately otherworldly in a way that's not entirely bad, at least not until the cat shows up. Now, as a lifelong production designer, he probably had a great eye for set design, costume design, and making sure they all mesh well together, you know? I think this generally leads to a lot of the better parts of the movie, the aesthetic parts at least. Like the cat being the only black and white character. That is a very intentional detail that is also quite interesting. Now, as stated, a television director is not very similar to a movie director. Television directors tend to let the actors have a lot more autonomy because they know the characters, and there's usually a lot of directors over the course of the entire show, so it makes sense for the actors to direct themselves a lot more often. In movies, that is not the case. In the movies, the director has pretty much the entire say, and the actors do not expect to direct themselves. Bo Welch, not having done this sort of directing before, was likely quite unfamiliar. Luckily, Michael Myers was there to help. Michael Myers was a self-appointed director, and he took on a lot of the responsibility from Bo Welch, and by responsibility I mean he went on a power trip almost certainly. He would redo scenes constantly, make everybody sick of him, like every other movie he's on, and just generally make the movie more granular and distinctive. Now, beyond all the production issues, him directing also gives it a certain flavor that is unusual for a movie of this caliber. If you've seen Wayne's World or Austin Powers, you'll be a lot more prepared for this sort of movie.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Where did you come from?
How do I put this? When a mommy cat and a daddy cat love each other very much, they decide that...
No.
Again, that's not very good for a kid's movie. There's a lot of jokes about innuendo, something that he's rather proud of and everybody recognizes about him. He likes to leave the dirty part implied, I believe was the quotes. But the thing is about dirty jokes is, even if they're just implied, they're pretty messy, and most moms don't like messes. This leads to a lot of really gross, inappropriate humor. Not inappropriate in the sense of it's crass, but like literally inappropriate. It does not fit here. This is a world of whimsy and color, and here is Mike Myers as the cat, mentioning his testicles multiple times. I mean, like, look at this. You can't get much more egregious than this. And in the deleted scene, it shows up again. Ugh, man. Bo Welch has directed some more, but he's sticking in the realm of television, which makes sense. Mainly the series of unfortunate events. Fantastic show, and his expertise in production design does show through once more.
Hey. Woo.
Why? Because I can.
As for the writers, it's actually kind of interesting. See, the three main writers are David Mandel, Jeff Schaefer, and Alec Berg. Now, these three have a history of writing, and they always write together from what it seems. These three buddies did all the writing for... See, these three... Now these three buddies did the writing for the last couple seasons of Seinfeld. They also did the writing for a couple of comedies together, like Eurotrip and The Dictator.
You made it with your sister, man!
They seem a little out of their depth with this one, huh? Not so. Now, Jeffrey Price and Peter Seaman were the ones credited for writing How the Grinch Stole Christmas from 3 years before, but in various interviews and little tidbits about it, the trio that wrote this movie seem to have also written the vast majority of that one as well, having rewritten the script for the other duo. Now, between this trio and Mike Myers, that's where most of the gross adult humor comes from. It's talked about quite extensively in the interviews since it's such a prominent feature of the film. Now, there's a technique when it comes to haggling. Say you're trying to sell this object. You want to sell it for $50. What do you ask of someone? You don't ask them for $50. You ask them for $100. And then they say, that's a little too much, let's do 50. And you're like, okay. Then you get exactly what you want. I think that Bo Welch did that sort of approach with the rating for this movie. See, he was apparently quite shocked that it came back as PG, suggesting that he intended for it to be a PG-13 movie that then he made alterations and cut down until it was more appropriate for kids. But in that sense, they would leave in some of the adult humor since it was already so crass. The Ratings Guild wouldn't mind too much if they left in, the jokes about erections and whatever else there was. Now about the trio of writers and the Grinch before it. You'll notice the Grinch is pretty sanitary, especially compared to this one. So what's the deal? Well, Audrey Geisel is the deal. Audrey Geisel was Theodore's wife, Dr. Seuss's wife, and she had an executive veto on any line she thought would be unbecoming of her husband's legacy. In The Grinch, she exercised this pretty often, cutting jokes that were too far, in her opinion, and I think it worked out for the better. I like the Grinch being somewhat sanitary. I don't want to watch and think of how the Grinch can have sex, Now, in this movie, there was a little discussion between her and one of the producers. There were a few jokes in the drafts that Geisel felt went too far. Among them was a scene in which the cat looks at what is, by implication, a centerfold of the children's naked mother. After which, both his hat and tail become erect. I said, Audrey, this movie may not be for our generation. That is Grazer, one of the producers. And if it was not for your generations, who was it? Because I don't think any generation really enjoys the cat's little erections. I mean, it's right there in the text. That is exactly what he intended for it to be. And man, is it nasty. Audrey Geisel did tone it down with some of the vetoes. She said that they could do more of what they wanted, and more of what they wanted they did do. Unfortunately for everybody else involved. In addition to the jokes made by the writers, Mike Myers loved his little innuendos as well. And according to Bo Welch, what Mike enjoys more than anything else is, this is dirty, but I'm not gonna say the word.
It's better than the last name we had. Super Hydraulic Instantaneous Transporter.
Oh, you mean...
Dude!
A big priority on set was pleasing Mike Myers, which was probably important so he didn't kill anyone. And a lot of where that accommodation came from was letting him say his own lines that were separate from the script. Famously, the little hoe line.
Dirty hoe!
I believe that he improvised that, and he wanted to keep it in. He fought to keep it in. He fought to keep in multiple of these gross jokes. The innuendo is one of the big parts of what makes this so memorable, but there are other parts of this movie that are also very, very bad. Now, the Grinch is a live-action character that is quite charming, even though he is a little bit scary. He's quite faithful to the book, and every illustration of him since then. But it also does not, actively give you nightmares. And the reason why is because Rick Baker was the makeup artist in charge, a genius of his craft. He was truly a legend, and Mike Myers scared him off. He was constantly impatient and constantly demanding of Baker to the point of where Baker just left. In his stead, he did actually leave one of his apprentices. Steve Johnson is the person who did the makeup for the cat, and he's an interesting character as well. He's certainly not bad, but I do not think he was a very appropriate choice for this movie. His Norman portfolio is incredibly impressive. He did a lot of the effects for Ghostbusters, for instance. His main shtick for all of his career was coming up with creative solutions for problems. There would be a problem of lighting, of, general logistics, and he would solve it by coming up with a creative solution. The actual makeup was second to this innovative genius, right? Whenever he did do makeup, it tended to be for less huggable characters than the cat, you know? He did a lot of ghost, a lot of scary, spooky makeup for monsters, and I guess he just had trouble getting out of that, like, mindset for this movie because the cat is a monster and a half. This is a big reason why people remember the movie as well. On top of Michael Myers being just difficult to work with, I think there's a perfect storm to make a cat that was terrible in every capacity. Of course, he also may have been doomed from the start. I mean, the Grinch is pretty much a green furry man. There's not much going on there. He's just pure fantasy. You can take him and you can make him in a lot of different ways. The cat, however, is not. The cat is based off of a cat, a living creature that you have to emulate if you want to make an anthropomorphic version of it. That's not easy. If you think that it is easy, I direct you to Cats from 2019. It was a nightmare as well, and it will likely live in a very similar category as The Cat in the Hat, for good reason. So we have all these ingredients of generally bad choices mixed up in a perfect storm of bad. What does that leave us? It leaves us a waste of an hour and 20 minutes that actively scars children and sometimes does make some pretty funny stuff on the internet.
If Sally and Conrad should learn from their mistakes, the contract shall be reinstated.
But of course it did have other effects since something of this nature cannot simply exist in its own vacuum. Notably, there are no more live-action adaptations of Dr. Seuss books despite the plans for it. And the reason why was because Audrey Geisel finally put her foot down, good, and said, "This is terrible, this is a stain on his legacy, I don't want this to happen anymore." And she did not let them do it. There's a lot more anime movies these days, movies that people like to hate on, but generally I think they're okay. I don't think it's as classic as the original 2000 Grinch, or even the animated one from before, but it's not bad, you know? There's a lot of little award shows that mock movies pretty much. They're not something I'm a big fan of. Things like the Razzies or the Stinkers, which is our case in point this time. Because this movie had them make an entirely new award, the Worst Child Actor Award. I don't like these because they generally are just overwhelmingly negative. They just make fun of movies and have no purpose behind them. And this award specifically mocks children. But I kind of understand this one. Spencer Breslin is really, really, really bad in this movie. Like really, really, really bad. This is one of the worst performances I've seen from anyone ever.
Wait a second, that's it, the opposite. Hey, Things! Don't help us! Do not show up and help us get home right now! You look terrible. And my mom thinks you're insane. This is what we in sales call a win-win scenario. So what do we do? I heard what you said. I'm not going to military school, Larry.
The award is named after him, by the way. The Worst Child Actor Award is also called the Spencer Breslin Award. And it kind of makes sense. I don't condone it, but I understand it, you know? Last and certainly not least is Michael Myers himself. This movie was one of the last big ones that he was in. Since then, he's been kind of middling ever since. A lot of franchises, and certainly very few big roles. I think he's starting to make a comeback, for better or for worse, but this movie certainly put a wrench in his gears for quite a while. Now, I don't have all too much else to say about this movie, but I do want to bring up some funny little implications that this movie gives us. There's a lot of throwaway lines, and being an early 2000 movie, a lot of stupid references. And some of those references make you real curious about the world that Annville lives in. I mean, look at this place. It's a picture-perfect, you know, American's village from the 1950s, except with a lot more color. And it's kind of strange. See, this isn't like a Whoville situation where it exists in its own world, separate from everything else. This place exists in our world. Not only does it exist in our world, it exists in our modern world, in our 2003. At least, large portions of it seem to be. For instance, the Taiwanese parliament fights. That's kind of interesting. Taiwan did not always hold the parliament for China. See, the parliament is called the Legislative Yuan, and it was originally in China, until the communists started to take over. During the revolution, it was moved over there, probably just for safety, and has remained there since, in Taiwan, that is. So, by being Taiwanese, communism exists in this world. Not only communism, but that implies Marx, that implies Stalin. And given the fact that the PRC kind of had the exact same history that it did before, it implies another leader. And you know what else supports that? Czechoslovakia.
Someone from Czechoslovakia is a Czech.
The cat has a stupid little joke about the word Czech, blah blah blah. He says Czech, somebody from Czechoslovakia. That's a little weird. See, Czechoslovakia is dissolved. It's dissolved into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. It makes sense. And it dissolved quite a while ago. He does not say somebody from the Czech Republic. He says somebody from Czechoslovakia, implying that it is still existent. Now, the reason why the two of them split was because the USSR's Warsaw Pact dissolved. So either this takes place before then, it doesn't, or the USSR is still at pretty much full capacity. The Warsaw Pact's still intact, and that makes Czechoslovakia still intact. This can only happen as a result of World War II ending pretty much as it did, which gives implication to that same leader. Speaking of that, Conrad almost goes to military school. Military school. A school for militaries, implying that Anvil belongs to some sort of state that does in fact intend to go to war, or at least defend itself from war. This of course implies that Anvil is in America, and the little behind the scenes video of Seussville, USA seems to almost completely confirm that. So Anvil is this bizarre, colorful village in the middle of America somewhere, presumably in California given the general vibe of the area. Now, the cat also has this runaway joke about It was very, very popular in 2000 for some reason. So people going like to indicate that they're meditating, along with usually mystical effects. Now, is considered the sacred sound of Hinduism. It is like it's a vocalization of the core elements of the universe, what holds everything together, pretty much. And that implies that Hinduism exists, which does mean religions are at least somewhat commonplace. So, if you'll notice in Anvil, there's very little diversity. There is still some, but very little. So it's not exactly an ethno-state, but it is rather strange, isn't it? So many people act so similarly, with such similar houses, it seems almost like a cult, doesn't it? A modern cult in America that comes after communism does not fall, but continues to prosper. Whatever that implies is up to you, but it's certainly fun to think about. Also, the Philippines exist, if you need any more confirmation that this is the same world as ours. Now, what do we do with this? There's not much to be done. I mean, as a movie, it certainly exists, and it certainly has a legacy. It's better than being obscure, isn't it? Overall, it does make you wonder, what did go wrong? As stated, there's a lot of effort on display. People didn't exactly phone it in, So I think overall, it really is just like a manifestation of a lot of problems in cinema. These people didn't not try. They did try. But they only try as much they're contractually obligated to. They didn't care that much about making this movie. They cared about doing a good job in the most vague sense. And can you really blame them? I mean, have you seen the screenplay? Have you seen Michael Myers act? All in all, I can't think of a more appropriate ending for the Seuss legacy than this burning car wreck of a movie.